Hey, welcome, folks. My name is Paul Rencken. Welcome to today's session. We're going to be talking with Riaan van Bergh, our manager of Centre of Technology. Today is our 62nd webinar of the year. Welcome to all those folks that have joined. We're going to be talking about online processes and how those take place. There is a list of our provincial managers throughout the country, from Bunhopley in the Eastern Cape all the way down to Henry Boot in the Western Cape, and all their contact details that you may need to get hold of. With that, I'm going to hand over directly to Riaan. Welcome, Riaan, and look forward to the session with the very valuable information that you're going to share with us. Thank you very much.
Influencing us to think differently. And maybe in saying that, let's just keep that in mind and have a thought for Sir Ken Robinson. The Centre for Technology is running Tech Talk at 2 on Tuesday every week. We had a little break with the school holiday. Last week we were up and running again with an international speaker, but it's every Tuesday. If you have any questions related to this, please contact us. I'm trying to work through all my mails and WhatsApps, and there's a few outstanding for today. I will get to the people that contacted me regarding AGMs and electronic by-elections, but I thought let's just share the session first and then take those queries. There's a YouTube channel, FEDSAS, the YouTube channel, that has all the Tech Talks previous sessions available for free. And we had a previous session on e-governance. So I want to push you guys towards that. Alles wat ons lewendig doen is nie net geldig of waardevol terwyl dit lewendig is nie. Jy kan na die tyd ook daarna kyk. It's like we say, we're in an on-demand society. And then I want to urge you guys to have a quick squiz at our electronic magazine that was prepared for this budget cycle. Quite a bit of hard work that went into that. It's part of the newsletter that went out, I think, towards the beginning of last week. And yeah, there's some valuable information in there, and then some members of the Centre for Technology that can support schools in many ways. Some of the content of the magazine talks about the budget cycle, how to do the budget in this time, but also how to think how technology can influence our budget thinking and reslicing and dicing the pie. We're saying it's a pause, not a reset. We should gather the valuable information that we've learned in this lockdown time. We should probably think of employing the thoughts and thinking cap of a CIO, a Chief Investment Officer in the school. And then one of the quotes that I love that I put in the book is, good governance should be like air. Its existence need not be discussed, but its absence would make a huge difference. So I think let's put on that thinking cap of, it goes without saying that air is there, but the moment it's not there, it would be the most important thing that we would manage. So let's deal with governance in that sense. If it's not there, the wheels will come off. We have a strong article on e-governance and the AGM budget vote or by-election. So let's delve quite deep into it today. I'm going to try and flip between Afrikaans and English. We only have the luxury of one session like this today, and yes, the audience is pretty wide and far, so we're going to be mainly conversing in English, but we're going to talk about the AGM mostly and the budget vote. Elections, by-elections are for specific schools that need to face that dilemma at the moment, and we have a process of that with the Department of Education in discussions of piloting and testing a process with live data. So if you're in a by-election phase, please contact us and make sure that you get the job done by using the tools that we have, because it is not possible to have a meeting for an election. We know that, but it's also not possible to have, be outside of the compliance of the law. So yeah, e-meeting and discussion, that was already dealt with way early in the COVID lockdown time in our newsletter 18. And yesterday we published newsletter 52. I'm going to ask our CEO, Mr. Colditz, to just open his mic. Paul, if you could just discuss briefly what's been discussed at NCF level and the validity of going forward in this process.
Thank you, Riaan. Good afternoon, everybody. Goeiemiddag aan almal wat nou na my kyk en vir my luister. We had a meeting of the National Consultative Forum. For those who don't know, that is a consultative body that FEDSAS managed to establish with the National Department and the Ministry back in 1999. So it's been going quite a long time. But we had a meeting on the 4th of August, and that meeting included the Department of Basic Education, the Education Governance and Management Directorate, and all the provinces and all SGB associations in the country. And that was particularly with regard to a discussion on how in this period of lockdown, or at least level 2, how it was level 3 at that stage, how do we comply with the prescripts of the South African Schools Act with regard to budget meetings, with regard to elections, and with regard to having governing body meetings. So in that meeting, everybody agreed that we should continue. Everybody realized that, as you've said, SASA was not drafted for a period like we're experiencing at the moment. So it's not possible to have a meeting, a budget meeting, for example, as you've said. But on the other hand, it's not allowed, it's unlawful not to have a budget meeting. So what do? Choose the lesser of two evils in order to comply with the prescripts of Section 38 and 39. And the only way you can do it now is electronically. Or you'd, for example, an election, you'd have to have full day elections. But that's not always possible. But it's much easier to have an electronic election, an electronic budget meeting, and it was agreed by all, by the provinces and Department of Education, their blessing, go ahead, do it, so that we can have maximum compliance with the law, even if we do not have 100% compliance. And I'd like to add something towards the end on that as well. Thank you, Riaan.
Thank you, Paul. Thanks so much. So there is no directive, just to summarize, there's no directive, there's no minute of the meeting as such, but it's been discussed, and we have the blessing to communicate what we did in our newsletter 52 yesterday at the highest level. So that means that there's no problem with going forward in that case. All right, thanks so much, Donkey Paul. I think that clarifies it. And schools that want to go...
Maybe I should just add, sorry, maybe I should just add, Riaan, we have not received the minutes of that meeting yet. So just to make 100% sure, before I signed off on newsletter 52, I spoke to the Chief Director of Education, Governance and Management, and just to get confirmation that our understanding is exactly as the departments, and all the departments of education's understanding is. So yes, he confirmed it once again, and he urged us to continue with what we're planning and what we set out in newsletter 52.
I think that answers a lot of questions about the validity of this. Perfect. I think if we put on our technology hats, and this was discussed at various levels with remote learning, online learning, continued learning, but it's very applicable here. We cannot ask if we can do it, but rather how should we do it? We should be making plans now to say, how do we function in this new regulated arena where we don't have all the luxuries which we used to have, but we can't, governance cannot stop at this point in time. So non-compliance is having no meeting, having no budget. Is that worse? Was it better to have that than to face the difficult meeting of an online meeting or an online election? We've got to keep our minds open about the fact that SASA was not written for long lockdown conditions, lockdown in mind. So we've got to work around, but SASA actually gives a lot of room for it. And then when looking at this, my consultations with school, everyone is like immediately, but how's everybody going to join? Not everyone has data, but in the past, we've never been concerned about 100% attendance. We've been concerned about having a meeting. So yes, access and the diversity and all these things need to be kept in mind, but we've always not had 100% people in our space, but let's have the meeting and give people the open option and the open door. As far as the AGM goes, I think if we have time, we'll deal with the by-election at the end quickly, but as far as the AGM goes, I identified 3 bullets that I want to discuss. As ons kyk na 3 goed, die wettigheid, en meneer Colditz het nou klaar vir ons gesê, daar word nie voorsiening gemaak nie, maar daar word voorsiening gemaak. It's not prescripted, but it's not disallowed, and we've got to go forward. Die proses wat ons moet volg, vir die vergadering en die hele, dit is meer as net 'n enkel geleentheid. The process is more important than the single event. And then the logistics. So how do we manage these 3 things? So I'll try to unscramble the egg and say, let's just quickly deal with the legality of it. And it's just good to refresh on that. And then let's talk about process. And then I want to get practical with the logistics of actually employing technology to run the process. So we all are aware of Section 38 in the Schools Act. We're all aware of what provincial regulations might say in this, and specifically in Gauteng. The other provinces will smile now, but provincial regulations in Gauteng require a 15% quorum for the budget meeting, where most provinces don't have it. So keep in mind what the national position is in SASA, and then your provincial regulations for all the Gautengers out there at least. So please consult with your provincial managers on that. I've asked Juané to quickly talk to us about the Roberts Rules of Order regarding e-meetings. Juané, just quickly expand on that, which we dealt with in an email earlier.
Dankie Riaan en goeiemiddag aan almal. Ja, Riaan, soos almal nou al reeds gehoor het, ons het nie wetgewing wat die proses reguleer of wat vir ons 'n bietjie leiding gee oor wat is goeie praktyk nie. En ek moet sê ons het weier gaan soek as nie die skolewet. Ons het in die Electronic Communications Act gaan kyk. Ons het in die maatskappye wet gaan soek. Suid-Afrika se wetgewing skiet in hierdie verband regtig nog baie tekort. Nou, ons het toe tog maar besluit dat ergens moet daar tog goeie praktyksreëls wees en dit is hoe ons toe nou uiteindelik op die Roberts Rule of Order afgekom het. Nou, dit gee vir organisasies goeie riglyne en praktiese advies oor hoe jy vergaderings moet belê, wat moet in plek wees en hulle spreek pertinent die aspek rondom elektroniese of digitale vergaderings aan. Nou, in hierdie verband is daar net 2 belangrike goed wat ek graag wil uitlig. En die eerste reël wat Roberts Rule of Order vir ons gee is jou stigtingsakte of in die geval van skole gaan dit die grondwet wees. Daai dokument moet spesifiek voorsiening maak vir hierdie prosesse, hoe dit gaan verloop, hoe dit lyk en dat jy wel so tipe vergadering mag hou. Dit is die een aspek en dan die tweede aspek, die tweede reël of aanbeveling as ons kyk na digitale vergaderings. Dan is dit dat alle partye wat aan die vergadering deelneem, moet vrylik aan besprekings kan deelneem en hulle moet baie mooi en duidelik kan hoor wat van die spreker se kant af gekommunikeer word. Dit is die 2 belangrike reëls. So Riaan, if I can just sum up in English quickly, the 2 rules is you have to consider your school's constitution to make sure that your constitution provides for such a meeting. That's the first one. And then the second requirement is that there must be a simultaneous oral communication, meaning that the participants must be able to communicate from their side and they must be able to hear the other parties in the meeting. Dankie Riaan, net so kortliks van my kant af.
Thank you. Bye, dankie, Juané. Yeah, so it makes sense that we can continue with this, but we've got to do everything reasonable to make sure participation is easy. Section 38.2, I'm just going to run these bullets. Before the SGB approves, so the SGB needs to approve after that, that's just housekeeping, we all know that. It's got to be presented to, not at. It's interesting that for the first time I read that, it's not at a general meeting. The meeting is not a place, it's a process and it's an event. So to a general meeting of parents. So we've got to ring fence parents only. 30-day notice, well known by everyone. And the budget has got to be for consideration. So you've got to present it so that people can consider applying their mind, and then approval by the majority of the present people by means of a vote. Now, I've not been to all schools' budget votes, but in the past, the vote for an election is by means of casting a ballot, but for the budget has usually been by raising of hands, and we're going to talk about that in a sense. But there's consideration, there's approval, and there's a process for approval and a tipping point of the majority. 38.3 says the notice contemplated in section 38.2 must communicate the fact that the budget is available for inspection at the school for 14 days prior to the meeting. Now, this is one of the challenges and conundrums we face. What is inspection? How far does inspection go? Does it mean that we can't share it with anyone? It's only available to see there. In my mind, once I've seen it, these days you go to class, all the kids at university have their phones up, and as soon as there's a PowerPoint on the slide, everyone goes, click, click, I have the information, click, click. So everything is now permanentized in some sort of way by means of electronic way. So we'll discuss that quickly, and I'm going to throw that ball to our CEO again. So the challenges that we have is security. We only want the people that should be there to join. And we'll talk about that in the logistics section of the presentation. Not outside parties. It's a public school, but it's a closed community. The confidentiality conundrum that some schools face, they feel, but if I disclose everything to the public, my trade secrets are out. And sometimes we trip ourselves up with the exception rather than the rule, because one person wants to be the industrial spy and commit industrial espionage. We take it away from the 99 people that should have that. So we want to emphasize today, ons wil dit benadruk. Moet nooit die geleentheid vir 'n ouer om insaag te kry verminder nie, verhoog dit eerder. And then the balance between disclosure, transparency and privacy. Paul, kan jy vir ons net gou so 'n bietjie insaag gee op daai ene rondom daai bestuursproses, en ek weet jy was betrokke by artikel 38 se skrywery.
Yeah. Well, as you said, Riaan, I was very much involved in the process of the drafting of the South African Schools Act. And initially, in Section 38 and 39, the first draft made provision for a quorum of 50% of parents to approve a budget. And I said right from the beginning that there's no chance that you're going to get 50%. So the compromise was the majority of parents present and voting. But the idea was, the intention was, parents are paying. So parents must have a say in determining the budget. Parents must have a say in determining the level of the school fees. So it's all about transparency, indeed. It's all about participation and democracy. So if we can increase participation, if we can increase the level of participation, increase the level of the democratization of our school environment, then we're meeting the intention of the South African Schools Act. And then as far as disclosure is concerned, you know, when I sat in Parliament when the Portfolio Committee debated the South African Schools Act, the draft, the bill at that stage. And I knew what was coming. Before 1997, before the Schools Act came into operation, governing bodies just decided on the budget and decided on the school fee. Parents weren't consulted. So as chairperson of a governing body, I went back to my governing body in October in that year. The debate was in Parliament in September. And I suggested that we should, you know, call a parent meeting and send the budget to all parents. And one of the governors said, but we don't want our stuff lying around in the streets. We don't want our numbers and figures lying around in the streets. And I then put it to a vote, and I lost with one vote. Next year, it was law that you had to do that. Okay, you don't have to provide the entire budget to parents, but in our checklist as FEDSAS, we're also suggesting that at least you must let parents have a summary of the budget so that they're informed. If people are informed, they'll participate. If people are informed, and please have a look at Malcolm Gladwell's golden principle of legitimacy. If you're open, if you hear what people are saying, you'll get buy-in. So the disclosure part, the transparency part, the participation part, the democracy part, those are all things that was envisaged in SASA. And that is the essence of compliance. Let me just take it a step further and say, okay, now we have next year, and we're saying school fees at this school will be 2,000 Rand per month, for example, and you have one parent who's unhappy about it and takes you to court, what will the court do? If you've had no meeting, you don't have a valid budget. You don't have a legitimate budget. So your budget will be set aside. But if you can convince the court that I made use of an electronic process, that there was participation, that there was, in effect, a meeting, then chances are that the court will not hear that parent. So, as I said at the beginning, it's actually the lesser of two evils. And the lesser of the two evils is having the electronic meeting, having an electronic election, even though at this stage the regulations may not make provision for it. And that is exactly the point we discussed at the meeting with the Department of Education. And the Department of Education has also issued a newsletter to say, or directed, not a directive, a circular, to the effect that all these processes with regard to by-elections, for example, must be completed by the end of September. Now, if you can't have a meeting, how do you do it? Electronic meeting and electronic election is the way to go. Thanks, Riaan.
Yeah. Thank you. I just want to add to that, that meeting with the department was an online meeting. Recent court cases, online platforms, and even Parliament took place online. So we're not that special that only us as the school sector should consider, should we do it? It is custom and practice. And yeah, so disclosure is there. Thank you. Thanks, Paul. Okay, so the process of the meeting, I just want to philosophically just cover some background. The meeting is part of a bigger process. I said that at the beginning. So the electronic event does not replace the whole process. And we discussed that with the electronic by-election yesterday. The tool for the by-election is just casting the vote. It does not take care of the whole process beforehand. So think of it as this is just one tool in my toolbox, my arsenal of how to run this. So duplicate then as much as possible of the physical world into the electronic world. So think of how this would have looked physically. You know, so we're sitting now, a lot of you, all of you can see me, I can see only your names, but if someone raises their hand or comments in the Q&A box that they want to be visible, I can say, okay, as chair of this meeting, I will allow you to speak for the meeting rules, 90 seconds, a minute, 2 minutes, and then we will take it. It's not chaos when that happens. So think of that in that mind as well. Be aware of back office management processes. Back office management, the meeting that we're running now, this webinar, took place because a lot of things had been planned and done beforehand. And whilst this meeting is in progress, there are some people that are not visible taking care of some back office issues, hosting Q&A, making sure people can come in, checking the security of the waiting room, these kind of things. Those are the things that would have happened in the physical world, like opening the hall in time, making sure the seats are packed out, the lights are on, the projector is connected to a computer and is fired up so that the presentation can be seen, that there are lights on outside in the building, the premises, so that people can park and walk safely. There's always a lot more in process behind the scenes than just from the stage. So keep that in mind and let's get our minds going there. And then I want to highlight strong meeting procedure married with the tech platform. So using a tech platform, we're using Zoom and there's many of them out there, but we're using Zoom very successfully. So we've become accustomed to how we should use it and not let the technology take away from the meeting process. So whoever is going to chair, who's going to host, who's going to manage the back office needs to be sure how the technology works. And in order for it not to turn into chaos, have a strong meeting procedure, which you would have had in the hall in any case. There was never chaos in the hall. There was a chairperson, there was a start time, there was a microphone, one person speaking at a time, there was raising of hands. All these things can be duplicated in the electronic process. Preparation of budget. So here's the steps, the preparation of the budget as per normal. That takes place at school. The electronic platform isn't going to replace that. The information session, if you have something like that, either your FinCom does that with a broader SGB, maybe limited number of parents, whatever the precursor is, to just bounce that off. And that's one of the suggestions that I have, especially in this case, that your first run at an online meeting is not the one with the AGM. Test run it, so word wedstrijd fix by doing it with a smaller group. Become match fit by testing it out. Then your notice, still as per SASA. Your quorum, as per the regulations and SASA. If no quorum, mainly speaking to the Gauteng, it's the same procedure. If the meeting didn't make a quorum, you probably have the option now of calling a lot of people and say, just look at yourself when there's a link in there, just dial in for the next 15 minutes, 20 minutes or so. But the same procedure takes place then. Back office management. This is where I think it's critical to think of these things, and this is the suggestions that we're making. Make sure that your voters roll, because of the security and privacy, as well as the open community balance, we've got to make sure that we invite only the people on the voters roll. So that's got to be clean and that's got to be managed. Communication methods with your voters beforehand. Make sure that your communication goes out. Make sure that people know that they can have insight. It's a different platform, but the meeting still takes place. The registration process, as you all registered for this meeting that we're having now, you had to put in some information, and we know that only registered people can come through the gate into this process. You can use your parents' family code or ID number or learner name or something like that, but just a unique identifier of which there is only one. And then file sharing with security for the meeting pack. I've had a few schools say that their suggestion is to record something or disclose documents beforehand and make that available, but have the balance between making it available by means of file sharing on OneDrive, Google Drive, whatever the platform is, and then allowing it only edit, not only, no edit view, but view only status. So anyone that logs into that link can see the document, can take a screenshot, yeah, sure, but then someone wants to be malicious about sharing it, but they can't download it, they can't take it with them, but they have full access to it by means of their unique identifier. So you can share it with anyone with the link, specific people. You can allow editing. This is just a screenshot. This little picture that I have here is a screenshot of the sharing function in Microsoft OneDrive. You can set an expiration date. So you can have the documents, the videos, the presentations available beforehand, and then let it expire. So the viral nature gets curbed in some way if that is one of your concerns. When the meeting starts, you've got to have the back office management of the entry and vetting the attendance register. So this is where it's going to get slightly logistical in a few minutes, but someone's got to manage it, and it's not the chairperson of the meeting, it's not the host of the meeting, it is someone working in the back. It's just the secretary of the meeting or the working secretary of the meeting to say, we make sure who comes through the door, and we tick that off against the attendance register. And most of the platforms have that functionality, and we'll talk about that now. The presenters and back office staff need to be appointed for that meeting day. They need to know which roles are assigned to whom. Don't let the presenters be worried, but I have no concern about the Q&A at this point in time, because otherwise I take my attention away from where this meeting is now. The meeting host to accept entry and view the raised hands, the Q&A, and then Jaco just opened his screen, so I know he might want to say something. I can respond to that. So Jaco, I'm just going to throw it open to you. Is there anything specific in the Q&A that you wanted to add?
The backroom staff is crucial, and most of the FEDSAS events, even though it's a presentation, there will at least be 5 people working in the background. So if everybody can quickly open the videos, everybody can see the whole team working in the background now to answer the questions, to double check the bouncers, everybody. So that's part of the staff, not everybody, Alreta. So there's the team working behind. So you've got 1 present and 5 working in the background.
Happiness. Dankie, Jaco.
Riaan,
Paul, you want to add?
Can I just ask you just to keep an eye on your earphones? They're touching your lapel every now and again, your collar.
I'm sorry. Yes, see, we're wearing T-shirts these days, so hopefully the sound isn't big. All right. So that's back office thinking, and that's pre-meeting prep and planning. Now, with the meeting being online, the immediate thing that comes to my desk by means of tons of emails and even WhatsApps, people saying, do we know what data costs? Yes, I do. We use it quite often, and it's cheaper than petrol. So I'm not saying it lightly to say that the school would have paid the people's petrol, but if 400 people drove to school and they each traveled 20 Ks on average, going to school, you have quite a bit of fuel running around. So yes, data is important and it is expensive, but there's an opportunity cost of driving to school and risk and everything related to that. But it implies we've got to plan for data. A longer meeting requires more data. So we've got to be sensitive to that. The alternative is access at the school. So here we're saying we can't have a gathering at school, but we must give access to the people that wanted to drive to school because they don't have, or walk to school or get to school in some way. And this is where we suggest that schools prepare and plan for a hotspot of connectivity at the school by means of in the parking lot, or maybe even slightly bending the rules and opening up the lab with a very limited number of people and a lot of social distancing so that there is open access. Once again, to get to the start of the meeting, we want more people to be participating than less. So no hard gates to make it impossible to get to the meeting. So yes, that's a very strong thing on the logistics. Voters' roll, keep this in mind. We might have families that mom and dad is in the same house and they log in on one login, and then the vote comes and 2 votes count as 1. So we've got to think of it, 1 person, 1 device, 1 vote, even if they are together in the same household. And that might be more relevant during the voting or the polling process, not necessarily during the presentation process, but you will lose out because it's 1 registration, 1 entry. So if you want the double parent households to participate in that way, you've got to prep them to say, don't just use mom or dad's cell phone and sit next to each other. Make sure you vote from separate devices. Real-time confirmation between the list and the entries into the meeting. Make sure that whilst the meeting is on, you know who come in, tick them off. So the back office has got to be run fairly carefully in that sense. I've got a discussion document and I'm going to unshare my screen and reshare it again on a different, okay, now my screen just went dead, which is not good. Okay, there we go. We've prepared a discussion document that we'll share on our COVID resources, and stop share, start share again. This document will be available. So I've dealt with the precursor, everything that's on the top we've dealt with in the presentation, but I've got the bullets there. One of the things that I think is a really good win is the fact that it's a recordable session and there's an audit trail of what's happening, which is far stronger than what we had previously. So there's a lesser of 3 evils. The online meeting also has some evil the non-online meeting also used to have some evils to it. What we're looking at procedurally and logistically, and this is where I'm going to invite Paul Rencken to talk with me in a panel discussion rather, we're thinking that there are 2 types of online meetings or 2 types of online styles. The one is the webinar style, which is this, and the other one is a meeting style. And both of them have functionality and benefits that we have. And then what we're looking at is formats for the meeting. And this is what we've been thinking about for the last few weeks and also in discussions with some schools and proposals that they've made. There's the option of fully live, like we are doing now. Nothing was done beforehand. What we present, we're presenting now. It's live. So you open up the meeting and the meeting starts. That is a full replication of your physical meeting. People come in, you see who's there, and you start talking. Something that I also like is the fact that presentation, if I want to go to a meeting, I want to be prepared for the meeting, and that's why the 14-day insight into the budget is possibly in the act, so that people can consider and apply their mind. So what I'm also proposing is pre-recorded reports or pre-recorded documents of the reports that are going to be presented, and even the budget. And there you can play around with video recording, either by means of making a Zoom recording of yourself and presenting the budget. You can present your screen or just your audio and video and talk to the people, but there you can have what we call an edited version. You can have professionality, you can have clear content, you can have accuracy, and you can have timing, because we don't want the meeting to overrun and just become a long session. So what I'm suggesting and proposing, if that is in your means, think of pre-recording a small YouTube type, TED Talk type presentation of your budget, a shortened version, 3-4 minutes of the reports that the principal and the chairperson need to present, and have that available online for the community to view beforehand. Then start a meeting referring to that, have a very shortened version of that, but then that just makes sure that everyone is prepared when they get into the meeting. So that's just a proposal, and using technology and further. Some of the suggestions we've seen, and we're not proposing this and not advising on this, is to do everything asynchronously and no meeting at all, where everything is recorded beforehand, emails are sent, email comments are received, and it's only a round robin type discussion. No one is ever together in the meeting, and that's not what we want to discuss. So Paul, I'm gonna jump into the webinar format and the style of the meeting. So this is where we're just proposing the sweet spot to be, instead of an online meeting format, use a webinar format for control, but there's a lot of functionality to open up every speaker to comply with Robert's rules of audibility both sides. And not fully online, but online with pre-recorded and shared material of it. Paul, just run us through the differences between an online meeting and a webinar.
Maybe the easiest way to describe it is what would happen in reality. In a webinar is you've got a group of panelists sitting in downstairs, and you've got all the people sitting in the auditorium. And that's probably the easiest way to describe it, is so you've got a massive auditorium, 300 odd people like we have today sitting in the stands, and you've got people sitting down at the podium or at the control place. They're talking to everybody. A meeting, everybody's sitting around one big massive table. So 300 people, 304 people to be precise, sitting around a big table would get quite difficult to manage in the process. In reality, it would get quite difficult to manage. Most of the online platforms allow people to move between the two processes. As Riaan mentioned, we from FEDSAS have been using Zoom for a while, and we find it's worked quite well. You can move people from the audience into the panelists, and then they can talk into that process as well. Or you can just get them to actually talk straight directly to you from that side. You've got a number of controls in place on the webinar processes. As you can see there, waiting room and attendance registration processes. Like you all attended this session, you attended, you filled in the registration form, and then you were sent a unique attendance link. And that then allows you access into the process. And we can at any time also, we wouldn't do it because we're polite, we could eject you from the meeting as well to say, look, we don't want that person here, sorry, we can actually leave. So there's those controls that are in place from there. The link can be linked directly to one user only, so it's a unique link that only one attendee would be able to use, so that you don't have multiple people sharing it. There are options that you can share that link and spread it wider, so there might be situations where you do, if you don't control it from that side. Most of the suitable software on the webinar side can handle that distinction from that side. Meetings tend to be could be a little bit more chaotic if they're not managed. As we showed just now, we've got a number of people in the background, even on a webinar platform. But on a meeting platform, as I say, the easiest explanation, everybody's sitting around the table and people are putting their hands up at various times. Both the processes, well, on the Zoom platform and most of the other processes as well, have got some form of poll that's in the system that you can run. And that poll generally can be either anonymous or it can be registered directly to a person. So it allows an audit trail in the process that runs through. And that operates on both. And then you could add some outside poll system on there. So Google form or something else, you could quite easily add it in the way that we've shared the links from there. Yeah, Riaan, I'll just chat a little bit maybe about our path with Zoom and FEDSAS side, just to give you insight. We're not tied and married to Zoom. In fact, yesterday I had a bit of a moment when Zoom went down for 2.5 hours. And folks, I knew it was 2.5 hours because I was worried if I'd have to move everybody from a Zoom platform to a GoTo platform. I did have a second plan in place, and I think that's the one thing to consider, is make sure there is a second plan in place. Unfortunately, a colleague of mine who is using GoTo as well, he said he's got spare capacity, so I could rest last night. And if things went down with Zoom, we would have been on another platform today. We're not particularly married to one platform or not. I don't believe Zoom is any less dangerous as far as data sharing than Facebook is. And I presume a lot of you have got Facebook accounts when I say that. So the security hype that was thrown about it, I don't think is anything different. Zoom does, and I have to say a little bit of supporting, it works very well on a wide variety of bandwidth. It works on some low connectivity. Some of these sessions that we've been involved in, I've run off an ADSL line in the Midlands, and it's a 4 megabyte per second ADSL line. So it does run through a whole lot of, it does have that advantage that it is really lightweight and runs through from there. But I have attended meetings on Team and Google Meet and Skype, and I mean, WhatsApp, I've got 8 people on, obviously not suitable here. There is a list there, and I'll drop it in the chat box just now, of a number of software suppliers. When we look at the process, every 3 months or so, we do an informal assessment of whether Zoom is still good. Fortunately, we didn't do that assessment yesterday at 2:30 because we might have been moving somewhere else. But generally, we assess it every so often. Obviously, if you're using it once off in a school, you just need something that's going to work for that one time from there. I will share that link with you just now from there. Riaan, maybe take through a little bit of the format, and we can just add in there from there.
Yeah, I just wanted to add that getting software is like anything else. That does not fix the problem. That is just a product to fix the problem. So if you get a Zoom license, the meeting doesn't happen automatically. If you get a go-to license, it doesn't mean the meeting is there. So what I'm trying to say is there's a difference between the product and the solution. The solution includes the product. But if you want to manage this process, Zoom by itself needs a jockey or needs a consultant. And one of the things that we're proposing is that a school does not get their own Zoom license, but work through a Zoom room type consultant to say, we need a license for this month because the license for 100 people is $49. The license for 300 people is $89. And the license for 1,000 people might be, I don't know, $200. So you don't know. So something like that. Don't be the specialist in running the platform, be the specialist in running the meeting. What the format entails is, as I said earlier, that little matrix where we find the sweet spot, completely online. So only share some of the documents beforehand, and everything, all information is presented live, similar to what we've done in this meeting. But if I had shared with all of you a 3-minute video of the contents here and asked you to apply your mind, we could have run a poll now. And Paul, maybe you should set up a quick poll for us so that people can test the poll. Just say, think of a very creative question so that people can see the poll. So you can, there we go. Who are you today? Are you a principal, SGB member, life orientation teacher, school IT champion? And I hope there's a lot of IT champions. And the moment you participate, you can't double dip again. All right, so that is how the polling takes place then after consideration of the meeting. So online meeting, we've got live discussion, live vote and poll, front office team, back office team, we've got a test, live, run a test beforehand. Make sure that you've got one person per room, one device per room, because there are sound issues, feedback loops if you've got 2 devices in the same, because the devices are picking each other up and the signal is being sent on the internet. So make sure that you ring fence it to 1 device per room. You can have multiple people in front of 1 device, but more than 1 device in a room, you will struggle with the feedback loop on that. So that's the live one. Paul, come in.
Yeah, if I can just come back just to share the results of the poll, and it might not have been sensible in this process from here, but just to give you an idea, right away, I can come back and say 41% of you are SGB members and 35% are principals, school champions, 6%. Riaan, you'll be happy with that. And then there are some others in RCLs. Now that you can also put your resolution together for, so you can put your whole process together to say, we're going to vote on the resolution, we're going to vote on this component of the budget, we're going to break it up, and we're going to run a poll. As I say, I can go back now if I need to, an audit trail, and go back and see who actually voted for those. Very difficult, sensitive sort of discussion, but I can go back and see who has voted, and you don't put it in the hands of the wrong person, but the election officer can do an audit in that process from that side. So if that's set up correctly and in a sensible manner, you can run it through from there. Likewise, I have to say you can run it outside of the process, so you could run a process that you run through Google Forms or something like that if you wanted a little bit more detail and running through from that side there. So that shows you how easy it is to run it, that it is still audited. The registration process is your first vetting area to say that's where you're coming in, and Riaan did speak about that. So that is important. And then also your controls. So you've got backroom people that are looking and saying, okay, who is this person? Please identify yourself. Otherwise, we're going to ask you to leave the meeting, or in this case, we're going to remove you from the meeting. So you can manage it from there. Sorry, Riaan, just to throw that in there.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm going to ask Jaco or Juané or Paul to just think about the validity of the poll versus a voting system outside of the meeting. Because in your context, if your school used to just raise hands, are you happy with this? If you're used to sign a little piece of paper and go to an election booth, maybe that's the context. Jaco, do you want to expand on the validity or the easiness of using the poll?
Riaan, that will depend on your platform. Like you've explained, you've got a whole backroom staff that allow people to enter. So that's the security barrier. So in this event, the people who took part in the poll were those who were admitted into the meeting. So they were verified, they were registered and so forth. So we are satisfied that they can take part in this. But if you don't have control over that, then there can be questions about the validity. Now, I know from experience, we don't necessarily ask for all the ID documents of the parents in the hall as well. We presume they are parents and they sign a register. I don't even know whether it's the correct signature. So there's definitely a risk in that. But again, that will depend on the kind of software you use and how you admit people in that meeting and verify identity. So I don't think that's the biggest issue. Whilst I'm on, there are still a few questions coming in about the validity of can I email everything and get an email response? That's a poll, that's not a meeting. So in terms of Robert's rules, in terms of what we've said in our newsletter about the validity of e-decisions and the e-process, an email is not sufficient. So that's correspondence, that's not a meeting. So distinguish between the two. But you can send information and then ask people to participate thereafter. And Riaan, a few questions about the cost of the electronic platforms. Where should we get a budget for that, number one? And number two, more or less, what's the price of an electronic meeting? I can just say, you cannot afford not to have a budget meeting. So if there's a small cost to pay to have an approved budget, to incur cost and collect school fees for a whole financial year, it's worthwhile to pay the cost. That should not be your barrier. You cannot afford not to have a meeting.
Agreed. Yeah, but maybe on that, I've gotten a few quotes from a service provider for schools. An hour-and-a-half meeting in the region of 300, 400 people. You're looking at under 2,000 Rand consulting fees if you don't want to buy your own license. So yeah, I think it's not a strategic cost. It's affordable, and based on Jaco's comment, you can't afford to not do it. I had a question on load shedding there as well. What would you have done if the hall is full of people and the second meeting has no load shedding? So the same procedure applies. Load shedding will affect us more in the online world, but it might, even with batteries and 3G phones, be even more available to continue with the meeting. But if the meeting is interrupted with load shedding, you've got to reschedule again. The legal implications. The meeting should take place, and if the meeting could not take place physically, the second meeting has to take place with some sort of notice period there. I just want to quickly end up with this is the last document. So we're looking at proposing pre-recording a lot of the work beforehand, so that you're already in a new space, so that it's not nerves and technical issues. You want to present a good picture to the parents. So just record your presentation where no one speaks. The budget presentation is not the Q&A. So record that 10, 15, 20 minutes if need be. But keep in mind that people don't want to watch screens, and it's not a TV show. So make sure that you get the information across. If you look at the debates on the political front, sometimes they have 90 seconds and they load that 90 seconds with so much information that you have the full picture. So be very careful of what you say and what you don't say so that the message comes across. In saying that, people can then view that where they have data access, not necessarily at home, but maybe at work. At some other places where there's free Wi-Fi. So you make the data cost easier. Then have a live meeting and discussion, real-time meeting as per the Act. Condensed real-time reporting. So we pre-assume that you all did the pre-reading for the meeting and that you're prepared to consider this and apply your minds. And then go into the discussion point. That's where you back office manage it strongly again. People can raise their hands, they can go into the Q&A, and they can type into the Q&A, please open up my microphone, then we can discuss. And then you're a good chairperson in that process again, and you host the question, you take care of the situation, one person at a time speaking. If people want to open up their mics and wave, whatever the ground rules are that you set for that day, is in place. So live discussion, live poll and vote, given the fact that the security was at the door and not at the voting site. We've got a front office team, so the same conditions apply. So this is a discussion document. It will be live on the COVID link within the next 30 minutes. And I want to open it up to our panel and to the Q&A if there's anything more in the Q&A that we've missed. So just to summarize, what we looked at is, it is the only option that we need to do. So there's no debate about that. We've got to do it. We've got to take care of the legalities of the process. That would have been pre-existing in any case. We want to follow a solid process with the electronic event just being one element of the process, but manage that strongly. And then we want to take care of logistics, which is kind of the back end, the back office side of things. Once you've got all those covered, you can put that together and launch your meeting at the day of the event. So I don't know if there's any strong questions, Paul, that you want to throw at us. I see we're close to 3 o'clock.
There are some
went
questions
slightly over time.
Yeah, we might have covered some of these questions already, but I think it's still worthwhile putting them up. Also, just as a demonstration for those that maybe haven't attended, just to see how you can handle those questions and how we've handled them in the past. So let me just check that we're on the right share there, and maybe we can just handle some of those questions that have popped through there. I think we did speak about a school not being able to go virtual in 2020 for the budget meeting due to financial constraints. There is an alternate. I think we've discussed that you need to have a budget, folks. You need to have a budget meeting of sorts. So you need to look at a way of doing it. And we've spoken about some of those considerations. Daardie ander een daaronder, ek dink dit was in verbinding met die e-vergadering proses. Wat gemaak as jou grondwet nie daaraan voldoen nie? Riaan, miskien kan jy daardie antwoord?
Ek wil weer eens dit miskien na die regspan toe gooi, Juané of Jaco, as julle wil oopmaak. My gevoel is, hoe gemaak as jou grondwet nie daaraan voldoen nie, dan moet jy jou grondwet met 'n spesiale besluit aanpas. Of jy met 'n spesiale besluit neem en sê, ons weet die grondwet laat dit nie toe nie, maar die grondwet laat ook nie toe dat jy nie 'n vergadering hou nie. So the lesser of two evils, rather go with Mr. Colditz suggestion or advice that democratizing the process is better than undemocratizing the process. So if your constitution does not allow it, take a special resolution at governing body level to say we might be outside of our prescripts of allowing 30 days for the change of the constitution, but we have to have an election, a budget meeting, or just work with the timelines in that. But then follow the amended FEDSAS draft constitution or template constitution for SGBs, which include that paragraph since, I think, early May of this year. Juané, Jaco, anyone want to add?
Riaan.
Yes,
Riaan, Jaco, in the chat box, you'll see Jaco has posted the link to our newsletter on electronic meetings, which deals with the whole issue of amending your constitution and having a policy for e-elections and e-meetings. So dit is daar op ons webwerf, as jy by ons nuusbriewe gaan kyk of net daai skakel kyk wat Jaco daar gedeel het, dan sal jy dit daar kry.
Yeah, I think we just handled that as well, Paul. Paul Colditz's comment about that as well. So look at the newsletter in the chat box about our amending the school's constitution to allow for that. The difficulty is if you don't have the timeline to do that, what do you do now? So I'm saying, what is worse, non-compliance with an AGM or non-compliance with your constitution, where I think we've all been part of it over the last 6 months, that our constitutional rights have been infringed on somewhat because of disaster, the National Disaster Act regulations. So what do we want to achieve with it? Compliance is more important, or democracy is more important than compliance with the old one. Jaco, Paul, your name? Thumbs up on that?
Yes, indeed. There's also the principle of emergency. We do find ourselves in an emergency at the moment. So let me give you an example. I'm driving around in the city. My wife has a heart attack. I'm driving in a 60-kilometer zone, but I need to get my wife to hospital to save her life. So I'm breaking the law by traveling at 100 kilometers per hour. The law will excuse me if it has been an emergency. So I'm quite sure that if we're ever confronted in court with problems in this regard, like I said earlier, that we could also say emergency. We need to comply with the law in some way or another. If we, in the process, break a small little rule, no problem. But it's very easy to amend your constitution to make provisions for e-elections and e-meetings and e-decisions. We've dealt with that in newsletter 18.
Okay. There's a question, Riaan, that came in. Should schools give the Department of Education notice that they will be hosting an online budget meeting?
No, there's no provision. Let me take that one. I see everybody is nodding. No, definitely not, but you need to have proof of that meeting. So just keep the documentation. So if there's a query, if there's a question about it, you have everything available, but no need to ask permission. And somebody asked, will the Department of Education send out the circular in this regard? Mr. Mwele already sent out the circular asking for the by-elections to take place by the latest the 30th of September. But don't wait for the department to send something. It's already in the Schools Act. We know there's an obligation to the effect. So that's why we convey the information as a result of our meeting in the NCF. So we convey the message, but proceed. Don't wait for that. You may have to wait a long time, and then you don't have an approved budget.
Correct. I want to deal with the last question because, well, we've not lost many of our attendees, but there's a question about how do we verify that parents are actually parents? We legally have to check their IDs and they sign. So yes, legally it's got to be a meeting of parents, but there's no legal process to say the legality of checking their ID and signature is a means of complying with the fact that they are parents. So my question is, how do we make sure that the communication from the school goes to parents? So this is where I say the importance of data and information at the school. You communicate daily with your parents. You tell parents about events at school and you hope and think that you talk to parents. So make sure that you have the voters' role and the communication methods open to school. The second thing that I want to add to that is if it's a problem at your school, I mentioned context earlier, make sure that you have a unique identifier that only the parent will know. The bank calls me and they call me on my number. They ask me to verify my existence by means of my birthday or my ID number. So what maybe second or third layer level of authentication you need to do is ask them to register with their family code, with their ID number and their name or their learner's name. So there's a bunch of unique identifiers that you can use to get them through the waiting room. The second point that I want to make about this is I think because we want to be open in disclosure, but also be confidential and secure, we've got to get the buy-in of the community. And most documents that go out with a disclaimer to say that I agree to this process. I agree that I'm a member of this community, that I will not send out all personal information. You can't stop someone from doing that, but at least communicate the reasonable process of asking people to read the disclaimer, and if you want to agree with it by means of the poll, that they will not share the information. But that's the best you can do in the electronic space. Anything is viral at this point in time. We all know that. But do what is reasonable. But you can't verify that it's the parent joining in. You can verify that it's the registration link being used to sign in. And then you've got to ask yourself, what's the motive of someone else joining on someone else's registration and that sort of thing. So that's the wider the audience, the better the coverage of fraud and malice intervention in that, I would say. Anything else from the panel? Then I want to close the session, Paul, and throw it open to you. Yeah. Paul, baie dankie. Jaco, baie dankie. Juané, die jong dame.
Riaan, there was a question from Jaco van der Merwe. Must schools set out the procedure they intend following for the budget meeting in the Section 38 notice? Yes, indeed. It would be good practice to exactly describe to parents how it's going to work, how this process is going to work in your Section 38 notice, because you're giving them notice of a meeting, so you'll have to tell them exactly how this meeting will be conducted.
Perfect. Thank you. Is there any other pressing questions that we might have missed? The last question is just to share a list of potential suppliers facilitation of webinars. I want to refer the meeting back to the electronic magazine that I started off with. I'm very proud of it, so I want you guys to read it. And in there is one of our service providers, the members of the Center for Technology, Digicom Facilitation, and you can contact them on the contact details there, or just pop me a mail and I will refer you to them. Paul, over to you. Thanks so much, everybody. I hope it was an informative session.
Thank you, everybody, for your involvement and your patience. I'm just looking at the numbers, and we've just got still great numbers here. Just want to go back and share with you the upcoming webinars that we do have. We've still got a number of them coming through in the next while. There's a list of them in front of you. Some of them are paid ones. We do have to pay the bills here and there, folks. Some of them are free ones. So please have a look through that list. Obviously, this will be sent through to you well, and you will be getting further information with regards to those as we go through the process. The FEDSAS provincial managers, kom in contact met hulle asseblief. As Riaan said, there are some provincial processes that one needs to consider and have a look at. So please contact your provincial managers wherever they may be. There were some questions that came through that had direct bearing on certain provinces. And then finally, thank you everybody for your involvement and for your involvement today. I'm going to hand over to Paul Colditz for the final word.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you to all our presenters, and thank you to all attendees. I think it was one of the most important webinars that we've ever hosted, particularly now when we have to have budget meetings. Very informative, everything. And please, if you have any questions and you want assistance, don't hesitate to contact Riaan Bergh. You'll find his contact details on our website. He'll be able to assist you. You'll also find Paul Rencken's particulars on our website, and all our staff members. So under contact us on our website, feel free to contact us if you need assistance. We're there to assist you. Thank you very much. Thanks to our presenters, and thank you for the initiative, Riaan. And goodbye, everybody.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.